Hello guys, welcome to my channel bengalurutechies. Today we will be creating first project in our channel. So we will be creating a .NET Web API based URL shortener where we will be using .NET Minimal API and NoSQL database. So there is no hard restriction, you have to go with the NoSQL or SQL database. So I will be selecting ASP.NET Core Web API template and let me name it as URL shortener. I'll be using .NET 7 and as you can see there is a checkbox here for use controllers. As I mentioned, I'll be using minimal APIs, so I can uncheck at this point itself, but currently I'll be not doing it. Let the project get created with the existing template and I'll delete the controller folders. So if you are interested in knowing minimal APIs, how you can bind the Swagger to the minimal APIs and the complete details about using minimal APIs, please let me know in the comments. I'll create a video on it. So let me delete this controllers folder and weather forecast, which comes as a default template class, and let me build the solution and see whether all builds fine. So as you can see, rebuild has succeeded, so everything is fine. So let me start with building of URL shortener service. So for this, as I mentioned, I'll be using NoSQL. So let me go and install the required packages. Here I'll be using something called LightDB, the package. So there is no restriction. Again, you can use whichever the package you want or whichever the database, whether it is SQL, NoSQL. It's completely up to you. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be creating two endpoints at the starting phase. One is to receive the request from the customers or users. So it will be a map post which will receive the actual URL and send a shortened URL as a response. And another is to receive any request which is apart from this post endpoint, which will actually redirect you to the original URL. So based on the short URL passed, if it is a valid URL and it is already generated using our system, it will convert to the actual URL, means it will map to the actual URL and it will redirect you automatically to that particular actual URL. So let me start building the application in the same way. So I'll do map post. So this is the one endpoint which will accept the request from the users. So it will accept a delegate. So let me add it as short URL delegate or shortener delegate. So I'll create all the classes here itself. If you want, you can go ahead and create a separate class files and create there. For the demo purpose, I'll be creating within the program class file itself. So let me create this delegate. So what I'll be doing is I'll be reading all the requests which are coming from this coming to this particular URL within the context, and I'll convert to the required object and I'll start storing the URLs which are actual URLs, and if the URLs are valid, then I'll be storing and giving a response as a shortened format of the same. So let me create an object which is which this particular API receives. So this will be a RTO. So as of now, it accepts only one property, that is URL. So this is async method. Let me make it as async. And add a wait for the same. So what I'll be doing is I'll be reading this context from the request body. Let me read the values. So I'll deserialize this to a shortened URL RTO. This is asynchronous method. Let me add a wait keyword here. So here basically I'll be reading from the context and I have this object. I have deserialized string to this object. And now I need to make sure this URL is valid. I'll implement that logic a little later. And if the URL is valid, I need to store this value into my system, that is my database, and then I have to send a tiny version of the same. So let me register the dependency of the database. So here I'll be using iLite database interface. And since I have not created a database now itself, so what I'll do is I'll give a command to this while registering itself. So let me give that command. So what I'll say is register if it is not, you create if it is not already created. So let me give the name. So I'll give short URLDB. So this is the extension in which you have to end your names with. So it is dependencies registered here. Let me resolve this dependencies here. I can use request services, get required service, and this will provide me the database, resolve database. So now what I'll do is I'll create a entity model or DB model. So I'll name it as short URL. So here what I'll do is I'll keep it very simple. So because this particular service doesn't require much complexities here. So I'll have a property which holds the URL, which is actual URL coming from the users. And let me add a property which holds unique keys every time. So what I'll do is to keep it very simple, every time this unique key I'll make it auto generate every time. So this will be always unique, and it is auto generated by the system. So whenever a request comes from the user, so against that user, what I'll do is I'll encrypt this key. I'll use bit converter and encoders. I'll encrypt and I'll create a chunk of this or a slang of the same, and I'll use this itself as a response. So the actual URL will be chunked. Actual URL will be referenced using this chunk, right? So that whenever someone requests to decrypt this short URL, I have to just decrypt that or decode that chunk. It will directly map in the database with this help of this ID. When I decode that chunk, it will give me this ID, which will directly map to the URL which is stored in my system. So let me create that variable. So I'll assign it here. So as I said, I'll use bit converter to get bytes, and then I'll decode this, and I need to encode. Sorry, I'll encode this. I'll use web encoders dot encode, and I'll create a constructor. So I'll make sure whenever someone is trying to initiate this class, they'll send always this URL without miss, and this property is auto generated, so it will be taken care. So this is my entity. So let me attach this entity to the database. And I'll make sure this property will be auto incremented. So let me auto increment it. So here I'll pass this integer 64, so it will automatically map to this particular property and keep it auto incremented every time. So this is my entity. So now whenever I get this URL, the deserialized URL, and if it is valid only, I'll be doing this operation. So I'll add that logic little later. I'll be saving this into the database. So let me start saving this. So what I'll do is I'll create this entity. So now this accepts a string URL, so that does come here. So let me start saving this one. So I have to call insert. Let me resolve this error. So it says cannot convert short URL to short URL. Okay, so here I should use short URL. I must use DTO here. This is the database model. So let me replace. So this will resolve the error. So basically now I am getting a request. Whenever the request comes, I read that request and I deserialize this. So assume I get nothing. So let me create this one so that it avoids the object reference. So now once I deserialize this, I'm instantiating the database and I'm mapping this one, mapping the entity, and I'm saving the URL. So now once the URL is saved, I need to send the response, right? So let me create that response short URL. So here what I'll do is I'll use string interpolation and create that URL, the response URL. So from the context, let me extract the schema. Let me extract the host. And let me add the chunk which got created here. So this would be my response. So let me send this response in the context. So here I need to implement that URL validation. So whenever the request comes, I will make sure even before performing this, it is a valid URL. So let me add that logic. So if I'm able to create the URL from this request, so it is a valid. Let me do that. So it provides me output variable. So if this fails, it is not able to create means it is not a valid URL. So I'll be sending a bad request response. So let me add that within the context and return the same. So this will write bad status and it will send the response. If not, it will send this response. So this method now acts on the user and it will create a short URL if the past URL is a valid one. Otherwise, it will send a bad request. Now, once the user makes a request, so I need to user makes a request with a short URL. I need to redirect him to the actual URL which he created out of it, right? So for that, let me create another endpoint. So here, what I'll do is, so any URL which is coming from other than this endpoint is nothing but a request for me to handle the conversion from the short URL to actual URL. So I'll use a map fallback. So anything apart from this endpoint, everything should go to this delegate. So let me use this one and I'll create a delegate. So this is redirecting delegate. So again, I'll create this delegate here. So in the redirected delegate, what I have to do is whenever the request comes, I need to map it to our database and find out, okay, this chain maps to this particular URL. So let me resolve the database here. The last part of the URL is nothing but my chunk. So that will be, so let me rename this chunk. So this is what I'll be trying to decode and convert to a long and try to find it in my DB. So let me do that. So once I decode it, I have to convert it to long. So I'll use bit converter again. So this would provide me ID from the DB. So now I need to make a query. So let me attach the collection as well. I will just establish the database collection or entity. I need to find it here. So if any of this, it is nothing but the same. It is your actual URL. Or I can use find by ID and pass just that. So it will also do the same operation. So this is my actual URL. So now I need to redirect the user to this URL. So let me redirect him from within the context itself. I'll redirect to that URL. So here again you'll get another options like permanent and kind of keep this and revert. So what I'll do is I'll just permanently redirect him for now. So this is entity received. So here I have to use the URL. So this will redirect the user. So if the URL is valid, it will redirect. If it is not empty, it will redirect. Otherwise, it will keep you in the same page. And so basically now two things are done. One is it accepts the endpoint, it accepts the URL request in this endpoint and it validates. If the URL is valid, it will store it in our database. And whenever a short URL is requested, it will try to decode and redirect the user to that particular page. So let me build this and see for any compile time errors. Build is succeeded. There is a warning it lacks a wait method. That is fine. Or what I'll do is let me run this. Now the Swagger page will open. So as I mentioned earlier, what I'll do is instead of using a Swagger page, what I'll do is I'll create a small HTML page which will have just a button and the input box. And in the text box, the user can come and put his URL, the actual URL, and click on that button, which will generate him a short URL, and he can use this short URL, and whenever he clicks on that short URL or try to browse that short URL, he will be redirected. So let me add that one more. So what I'll do is I'll create, before adding that route, I'll create a simple HTML page, and to keep video short, what I've done is I've created HTML contents already. They're like plain HTML contents, nothing much fancy there. So let me take the code of the HTML. So I'll just explain here. It is nothing complex. So I imported all the CDNs. One is from the Bootstrap, one is from the Fontasm to use some fonts or icons. And there's a title and what this application is doing. So I have written in headers. And then here is the input box where a user can come and input his actual URL. Once the input user has put in his actual URL, the button will be enabled, or I think button is already enabled in the submit. I think I am validating, yes, in the submit I am validating that. So a button will be there, you can click on that button. So this button will call this particular function, which is basically making a HTTP request for my endpoint, which I just written here, right? So the URI endpoint. So it is making a HTTP request to that endpoint, and whenever the response comes, it is binding the same in this particular link format. If the given if there is any issues, it shows an alert. If there is any failure occurs whenever the service is getting executed, it adds it in this failure. Okay, so let me make sure, like, whenever this application runs, this is the first path which it will be called. And the should return. So let me return. So at this time I'll be sending that particular HTML which I just created. So let me build and run this application to build a success. So let me run the application. So as you can see, if I run the application, it is launching Swagger. So let me do changes in launch settings to remove that launching. So just you have to come here in the launch settings.json and remove launch URL Swagger. So currently our host is running in HTTPS. If I just remove here, it would be fine. Let me go ahead and remove in both the places. So if I refresh and run the application, now it will be launching our web page, which I just added here, the HTML page. So as you can see, so this is the new landing page. So it says bengalurutechies URLShortener service using Minimal API and NoSQL DB. So user has to come here and input his actual URL, and when he clicks shorten URL, it will give a shorter URL. So let me go ahead and take our channel's actual URL. This is YouTube's complete URL for our channel. So let me go ahead and take that and try to create a short URL form of the same. So it says undefined. Let me see what's the issue. So I have a breakpoint anyways. Let me see if the URL is getting created properly. So the URL looks fine. Yeah, I remember. So here what I did is when I was creating a HTML page, so here I am trying to deserialize it, like I'm trying to parse it, right? So I thought it will be an object. So but here when I'm returning here, it is just a plain single string I am passing. So let me convert this into an object, or that particular conversion I can make it to a simple string. So for now I'll do it here itself. So this takes anonymous object, so you can dynamically create the object and assign it. So it is expecting, I think, URL with the small. So let me take URL and assign that. So this should suffice that. Let me rerun that. Let me take again our channel URL and try to create a shorten URL. But then yeah, so as you can see, it is creating a short URL. Let me try to access this URL. If I click this URL, it should basically provide a actual URL, that is this one. So I'm clicking this, so it as you can see, it called my redirect delegate method. So but whether it got redirected, no. So I think there is some issue here as well. So let me try to figure it out, what is the issue. So again I'll click. So here if I see, I'm getting database ID is 1356, and I try to find, it is not finding. Okay, so let me again carefully debug this time. So The URL which is coming in the context is okay. I have added trim end at the end, but actually the slash is at the beginning. So if I just add trim is fine, or like trim start would be fine. So let me do trim. Okay, so when I do this, it will give the actual chunk. So previously, I think what used to happen is since this was not properly getting trimmed, so that slash also is coming. So if you see this chunk, that slash was included, which is not actually the value. So this is not actually my value. So I'm inserting now, it should not jump directly to those IDs. So in the range of 10,000, it should be like within the range of 1 to 100 max, I guess. So let me debug now and see the ID. So the ID is 13. So let me see whether it find that chunks, what is the actual URL, that mapping it was able to find. From this chunk it derived this ID. From this ID you can map it. Okay, this is the URL. So now it redirects. Let me see. So as you can see, it redirected and our channel got opened. So what I'll do is this time I'll just remove all the debugging points. So I'll delete all and I'll run it like seamlessly. So again I'll copy this, and this is the page where I can generate my short URL. So I generated this. So if I click one more time, so as you can see, every time the new ID is getting created. So that's why this values, the chunk is getting varied. Even though you're passing the same URL, the chunk is getting created, right? So, and if I click on this, it will redirect. So as you can see, as soon as I click, it redirects to the actual URL. And here one thing you can improvise here is like assume like if you put a invalid URL. So instead of this, just you say this, and I try to create a short URL. It says like no message as of now, so I can send that message says invalid URL. So let me do as the last thing here. So basically it is going here and it fails. The valid URL creation was failed. So here I'm not sending anything in the context as a response, just I'm returning. So let me add that. And I think in the HTML, let me see whether I'm trying to even deserialize that as well. No, I'm not deserializing it. It is just a plain text I am directly binding. So that would be fine. I'll just call it as invalid URL. Let me add a wait method here. So if I rerun the application, that would surface the problem. So this is my actual URL, the valid one. So it created a short URL, and if you click on that, it is redirecting to you to the actual URL. And so when I give some invalid URL, say invalid, and if you try to generate a URL, short URL out of it, it says invalid, right? So that is the gist of this project. So just to wrap it up with the summary, I used here a NoSQL database, a minimal API. So if you are interested in learning about this, either NoSQL or the minimal API, please comment in the channel. I will be very happy to help you there. And as I said, like if the database is not there, it will create the DB. So it created here, as you can see. So like in our normal SQL MDF and LDF, it is creating log and the normal one. So here is where I'll be not able to open in the running stage. So here is, but even if I open, I don't think you will be able to understand this. Yeah, I think I can't open it. Yeah, it is not in a readable format, so it is encrypted values. So this is the data which it is storing actually, and whenever it is requested, it is returning from the same. So basically, I created a short URL service which has two endpoints. One accepts the request from the user. Another, like I used a fallback method. Anything coming to this particular application apart from this endpoints, that is just slash and this one, you redirect. That is nothing but a short URL. You would directly redirect the user to that particular URL. And on the landing page, I use this HTML page and landed I made it as a landing page where user can provide his actual URL and generate a short URL from the same. So this is the application. If required, I'll add this application in the repo and mention the same link. So again, as mentioned earlier, I have created a short which says what is the importance of the short URLs, where it plays more importance and how it helps us. Please watch that. If you like the channel and the content, please like and subscribe and share. Thank you.